Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel and welcome to a new real-life car review. You've probably heard it say before, they don't build them like they used to. That may be true for a lot of cars nowadays, but not for this. This is the all-new Suzuki Swift. Now in its fourth generation, and the car stayed true to the original concept for over 20 years now. So I want to start off this review by doing a quick walk around and then discuss the design of this car. So depending on where you live, this is either the fourth or the sixth generation of the Suzuki Swift, because the Suzuki Swift nameplate was introduced in 1984 in Western Europe, and that model was in the rest of the world known as the Suzuki Cultus. We had two generations of that, and in 2004 the Swift was introduced as a worldwide nameplate with the iconic design, we can say. This car, its design always stayed true to that original concept with the well-known black A-pillars. So the window line and the front windscreen somewhat remind me of the motorcycle helmet, of the visor of a motorcycle helmet. And it's been copied by many other manufacturers. We've now have four generations of the Suzuki Swift, and to me they all look alike. They're clearly an evolution of the original concept, but this one is the odd one out, and that has everything to do with the review design of this, the underpinnings of this car. So the platform, the hard-tacked platform, I'll blink that in screen, is exactly the same as the outgoing model. So it's heavily based on the third generation, but they changed the design, and the most notable differences are the clamshell hood, because Suzuki now incorporated this front section of the bumper for pedestrian safety, collision safety. So the hood is a bit retracted, now you get a clamshell hood. The design of the headlights, which over here in the Netherlands are always LED headlights, has changed from the original concept. We have a large grille. You may notice that the hood emblem is black on this car, and this car serves as a test bed for the Suzuki imported accessories, and also the trim around the wheel arches, the black high gloss trim, are part of an accessory package. This car, as tested, is a trim level called Style. That's the top of the range trim version, which gets this nice polished 16-inch alloy wheels. Not too large. I really like the design of those wheels. Another thing that has changed, one thing that's original is this hump in the trunk. And as you can see that the script and the emblems are black on this car. The sign of the taillights has changed, but from any angle, no matter how you look at it, it's still a Suzuki Swift. One thing that they did change that from the previous generation is they moved the door handle for the rear doors from here to there. So that's much easier for smaller children to get into the car. And speaking about doors, this car is super light. As it sits right here, let's walk back for a second. As it sits right here, it weighs under 1,000 kilos, and that's quite a feat. And you can tell it's a light car when you open the doors, because the doors themselves are really light. I think if you have a collision and you need to replace a door, it's a one-man job. That's how light these doors are. And don't mistake light for flimsy or lack of build quality. They're good quality doors. They offer plenty of side impact protection, but Suzuki just managed to make those doors pretty light. But when you close the door and you don't throw them all too hard, this happens. They don't shut entirely, and that's just the door bumping into the air cushion that forms in the interior when you close the door. It may come across as lack of build quality or lack of fitment, but it's not that. It's just the fact that these doors are so remarkably light. Anyway, let's carry on with taking a peek under the hood. It's a regular hood prop. There are no gas struts under here. So important to know is that the new Suzuki Swift comes with one engine option only over here in the Netherlands. Suzuki developed a completely new engine that replaces the outgoing K10, K12 and K14 engine series. The K10 was a 3-cylinder turbo engine and the K12 was the most common engine for this car, the entry-level engine, a 1.2 liter 4-cylinder, and then you had a 1.4 booster jet, which was supplied in the sport models. Now we have one engine option only. This is the Z12E engine. It's a completely new development, and I recently did an in-depth article on this engine. I'm gonna get into detail later. And also the only engine option comes with the integrated starter generator, making this a mild hybrid. It's absolutely the bare minimum to call this even a mild hybrid. I'll go into detail later, but that's the only option for Western Europe. It's a remarkable engine in many respects. This is a thing where you can say they don't build them like they used to, unless you buy a Suzuki. It has the exact same displacement, 1197 cc's, as the outgoing K12D engine. You would expect this engine to have a lot of torque in the lower end of the rev range, but in fact it makes a bit more torque than the outgoing K12 engine, but at much higher revs. Anyway, when you look at the engine, it's all tried and true technology, genuine tried and true technologies. This is all technology that was available in the 1990s, but they really over-engineered this engine. It's a chain-driven camshaft, so with our double overhead camshaft, 4 valves per cylinder. But when you look at the timing chain, it's as if Suzuki went to the motorcycle department and took a chain of one of the motorcycles. That's how thick and sturdy it is. It runs on remarkably long timing chain guides, and it just has a simple mechanical tensioner. And why did I choose a mechanical tensioner? Well, if you have an oil pressure tensioner, those are sensitive to oil quality, oil pressure, and if anything goes bad with your oil quality, if you skip an oil change or two, or you have a lack of oil pressure and there's not enough tension on the chains, it skips a tooth and you have engine damage. Not with this simple technology. It just works, and it will work for the lifetime of this engine. When we look at the cam train, the valve train of this engine, set double overhead valves with big cams, big cam lobes. They are wide. They run on roller rockers, and that's, yes, would say almost Lexus-like engineering. And they have a hydraulic lash adjuster, so you never have to do any maintenance to valve clearance. Really over-engineered part. Another remarkable thing that I found is that each cylinder has 2 oil squirters. One cools the piston bottom and the other one cools the cylinder wall. And I think they did that for a future turbocharged version of this engine, because having 2 oil squirters on an 80 horsepower engine, yeah, that's really overkill, but it's there and it's the better for it. When you look down here, you can see that the exhaust manifold is cast in the cylinder head, so it has cooling jackets around it. The catalytic converter and the particulate filter are directly beneath here, and I can fit my hand in between here. If it ever needs work, if it ever needs replacements, it's so easy to work on. The starter generator, well, I forgot my notebook, so I'll blink the numbers in here. Doesn't have a lot of power, I believe 3 kilowatts, and it's driven over a thick belt. The tensioner is directly on the starter generator itself, and the way I see it, you can get the tensioner off, release the tension, get the tensioner off, and replace the timing belt within 30 minutes. I said timing belt, I mean the drive belt for the starter generator. That has to be replaced every 80,000 kilometers. Yeah, and as said, it just looks like a 30-minute job. This engine is real over-engineered, and yeah, to make this into a mild hybrid, they did the bare minimum to make it a hybrid. But it yields great results, especially when you compare it to the much more complex technology Toyota uses in the Yaris. I'll get back to that in the drive segment. When you look at the transmission, it's available with 3 transmissions. This is a 5-speed manual, then you have a CVT, but you can also get this 5-speed manual with Suzuki's all-grip, all-wheel drive system. As said, I did an in-depth article on this engine. I was really impressed. It's, well, nothing new, but the way they over-engineered this thing is remarkable. Now, let's have a peek in the trunk. Well, sun started shining, so I'm wearing my sunglasses. Anyway, to the trunk and cargo area of the car. As said, this still has the iconic Suzuki Swift shape, and one remarkable thing I pointed out is this bulge over here. One benefit of this design is that the trunk opening is pretty wide. You can see there's this little bulge here that houses the backup camera. Other brands are better in hiding a camera, but in this spot it's a bit more protected from backup incidents. Now another car can run into your back, of course, and when you have the camera in the bumper area, well, it's probably damaged. It's safer over here, and if you ever need to replace it, it's much easier to replace it from this position. So let's open it up. Of course, it does not have an electric trunk opener. The trunk is very basic. I'll blink the numbers in here for the cargo area, with the seats, rear seat in place and the rear seats folded down. It's a nice and square trunk area. You can fit 2 shopping crates in here, but you have to keep in mind that the trunk floor is quite low. This is about, well, 20-25 centimeters, so it's pretty deep. So if you have heavy shopping crates, you really have to pull them over this edge here. The trunk floor itself is very basic. It's a carpet, and then underneath here is no spare tire, but a polystyrene box with a towing eyelet and a reflective triangle. And here is, I would say there was a tire repair kit, but there's not even a tire repair kit in here, just a safety vest. Not sure if someone took that from this car, but anyway, no spare tire, and in this case no tire repair kit. And behind here there is a symbol of a car jack over here, but there is no car jack in there. You can get this panel out and you have a little bit of storage behind here for emergency equipment. The parcel shelf is a one-piece parcel shelf, and well, when you get it out you have to put it somewhere on the floor here. There is no storage area. This is very basic, but it's nice and square, and it's pretty usable of a car this size. Now let's head over to the interior. So if it's your first time getting into Suzuki Swift, you'll notice that this car is completely different on the inside, and that has something to do, or it has everything to do with the angle of the front windscreen. It's a much steeper angle. It's a relatively short windscreen, and the headline, the roof, extends very far forward. If I stretch my arm, I can barely touch the windscreen. The bottom of the A-pillar is at a normal position because of the steep angle. The top of the A-pillar is pretty far away. So that's something unique to the Swift, or maybe the Mini perhaps, and it feels like a little bit like sitting inside a motorcycle helmet. Anyway, let me close the door and we'll have a view around the interior. Let me get the action camera. Instrument cluster with physical analog gauges. I like that very much. There's only a small screen in the center here. Let's mute audio. And it has a lot of settings in this board computer. Currently it shows the torque and power output of the engine, a bit overkill this type of car. The outgoing boost jet version had a boost gauge in here, and there's brake and accelerator. This is the hybrid monitor, and this is for the adaptive the safety systems, and there are a lot of things for the trip computer, and even there's an accelerometer that shows you the G-forces, accelerating, deceleration and cornering G-forces. This may seem a little bit overkill, but the handling of this car, and especially the cornering of this car, is so good that this actually makes sense. Now let's get it back to the hybrid monitor. Okay, in the center we have a large screen. It's a touch screen with Suzuki's in-house navigation and infotainment system. I kind of like how it works. Let's go to audio. Digital audio broadcast works nice, and you can switch off the screen, but you have to look. This is something I have issues with. You have to keep this button pressed for a longer period of time, and I can switch the screen off. I like it, having audio without having the screen on. There's a small cluster over here. It's a single zone climate control. Let's switch it on for a brief moment. Yeah, it's basic, but it really does work. I do like this white accent. You have the same over here with a triangular polygon pattern. It also returns in the door. It comes with higher trim levels, and this satin silver is unique to the highest trim level. Now I can see it, but you can. Over here is the driver attention monitor, so that sits over here. This system works quite well, only if you're really distracted this thing starts beeping. And to switch off the speed warning, and that's really annoying, what you have to do is you have two stalks in the instrument cluster, one at the tachometer, one at the speedometer. You keep the one at the speedometer pushed in for a brief moment, 3 seconds, then you get into the settings menu and you can click this to the right and left. So you click 3 clicks to the right, TSR, traffic sign recognition, keep the stalk depressed, traffic sign recognition, click down, off, and you can see the symbol over there. Now the traffic sign recognition is off, and as soon as you start driving the car, this goes to the normal trip computer mode back again. We have to talk about the seats. Let me switch off the car and open the door once more because it's getting kind of warm in here. Howdy. Seats are very basic. They have soft bolsters, but these bolsters do work really well. There's not a lot of adjustment in this seat, but for longer and shorter drivers you can get a great driving position in this car. Allow me to demonstrate. So the steering wheel tilts and telescopes over quite a long distance for a vehicle of this class, and also longer drivers with a taller posture can find a good driving position in here. But you have to keep in mind that in the Swift, because of the design, the length of the roof and the short windscreen, if you're a taller person and you're sitting front row at the traffic lights, it can be pretty hard to see the traffic lights, so you really have to lean forward to look up to the traffic lights. Most European countries have a secondary traffic light at lower level, you can see from here, but in the cases that you don't have it, you have to keep in mind that you have to lean forward to see the traffic signs. Anyway, let's get this into my driving position once again, so we can have a peek what the space for the rear passengers is like. Now, before I get into the rear, I think it's worth noticing that the door opens pretty far, much farther than in the Toyota Yaris, for instance, and you have a nice large, almost square door opening at the top, and that's really convenient if you have smaller children that you have to put in car seats in the back. Now let's hop in with the seat in my driving position. Yeah, this isn't all too bad, I must say. Yeah, the seat itself is pretty short, but the angle of the seat back is nice. You do have to pull up the headrest, of course you do. I can stow my feet under the driver's seat. So when it comes to space and seating comfort, it's good. Now let me get my camera for a quick look around. There's a cup holder in the center console, but there are no vents and no charges. In that respect, it's pretty basic, and the windows are pretty dark tinted. There also is a cup holder, a bottle holder in the door, and a speaker in here. Materials are much simpler than in the front. It's the bare minimum over here in the back. Now let's do the window test. Yeah, and view towards the outside is good. I think smaller children in car seats have a good view towards the outside, so if they suffer from car sickness, it would be much less when they have a good view towards the outside, as is in this car. Yeah, it's basic, but it's quite comfortable, and I could sit here for a couple of hours. Now let's open the door because it's getting warm. Let's go out on the drive. So it has been a while since I last tested a car with a manual gearbox. The last one was the MX-5 Miata, and one before that was almost 2 years ago, was the Toyota Aygo Cross. Anyway, it's nice to be driving a manually shifted gearbox once again, especially when they are as good as this one. It was my personal choice. I would always go for a Swift with a manual gearbox. It is so much fun to shift this clickety-clack gearbox. Short throws, nice feel to it. Clutch is also very light, maybe a bit too light for my liking, but oh, sorry pigeon. It's not hard to distinguish the point of engagement of this clutch. Oh, There's some resting birds out on the road. Car is starting to warm me. Anywho, real nice gearbox. I must say that fifth gear is a bit long. It's fifth gear from 60 kilometers an hour. So when you're driving 80, the car does about 2000 RPM. But when you drive that on a highway, you want to start overtaking from fifth gear, 80 kilometers an hour. There is not much pull to this, in the acceleration. It's a real overdrive, so if you want to start overtaking on the highway from 80, you always have to shift back to fourth gear. Speaking of fourth gear, I can now drive in fifth gear, was driving in fourth gear because the engine is really quiet. I didn't mention that in the under the hood segment, but this engine does not have balancing shafts, so it's balancing out with the crank weights, the counterweights, and a large, fairly heavy flywheel. And you can always feel that on upshifts, especially when you're on a bit of harder acceleration and you pull past 3,500, 4,000 RPM and you want to upshift. There is a little bit of rev hang. The engine doesn't drop as fast in revs because of the large weight of the flywheel. It's also a bit intentional by the motor management for emission reasons. Now, another thing that really benefits from the low vehicle weight is, of course, the handling. The steering is very light, very precise, and the car just, it's almost like going on railroad tracks. You can carry so much speed into a corner and you just turn the steering wheel. There is no body roll. The car just goes into a corner, and that's just so much fun to drive. You don't have to drive over the speed limit to enjoy this car, and it's a really rational aspect to have an efficient and low weight car with a very no-nonsense drivetrain and suspension setup. But the effect is, like many cars from the 1990s, they really drive and handle so well. And that's what I said in the intro of this real life car review. They don't build them like they used to, but the Swift always has been a real fun to drive car, just as a side effect of its rational aspects, being lightweight, well constructed, having balanced suspension and steering. Those are very basic needs for a car, but when you do those things well, we end up with a real fun to drive car, which also has, proven great reliability, and I trust these engines will last at least 500,000 kilometers. And the cost of running these cars, fuel consumption, road taxes, when they're according to weight like over here, the cost of ownership is just real low. Okay, there's a small speed bump over here, maximum speed. I think for a car of this weight, Suzuki managed to find a nice balance between comfort and handling. Admittedly, it's pretty hard to have a light car like this handle or be very, very comfortable. You really need to have soft springs. I explained this in the Lexus LBX review too. It's a bit hard to get a lot of driving comfort from a light car, but as with the outgoing model, they found a nice middle ground between handling and comfort. Driving alone on roads like this that you share with a lot of motorcyclists and bicyclists, a lot of smaller vehicles, it's good to know that the overall visibility is great from the driver's seat. Yes, you have this extended roof that can be a bit tricky when you're sitting in traffic lights. That's about it. The overall visibility, especially due to the rake of the A-pillars, the overall visibility in city traffic, inner-town traffic is great. Nice large door mirrors, and when you look around, the windows are quite high. Visibility of this car is remarkably good. So let's head out to the highway and do a little bit of highway driving. Now, before we hit the highway, I want to point out one thing. The Suzuki Swift has always been the cheapest car that's available with adaptive cruise control. And in my experience of test driving hundreds of cars with adaptive cruise control, the Suzuki Swift has the most refined adaptive cruise control. It has very natural following distances when you pick the lowest following setting, the lowest following distance. And yeah, it's really natural to accelerate and decelerate in its response to slower or faster vehicles. It's always been one of the better systems, so now we're approaching the highway. We also want to give that a test. Approaching the on-ramp. I'll keep quiet so you can listen for engine noise in this car with full accelerations. So 2000 RPM, second gear, 30 kilometers an hour. There we go. $80, 100, fourth gear, 110, fifth gear, and put on cruise control, lane assist, approaching a slower vehicle in front of us. It slows down so nice and smooth, going to overtake. Now it starts to pull from 2,500 RPM, 100 kilometers an hour in fifth gear. Does this nice and smooth. From this point on, from this speed on, there's no need to downshift to accelerate. Does it ever so nicely. You can tell that this car becomes a bit noisy at highway speeds, especially the noise around the A-pillars and the windows, but tire noise, suspension noise under all driving circumstances, under all speeds, and that is really quiet. Most noticeable is the wind noise around the windscreen. So here is our off-ramp. Now, before I end this driving segment, there's one thing that I want to point out, and that's the climate control of this car. Currently I'm using the climate control, the air conditioner. It's a bit warmer today. The last couple of weeks we had real low temperatures and a lot of rain, so I had to use the heater in this car. And it's remarkable how fast this car can heat the interior. You drive off and just 1 kilometer later you already have warm air entering the cabin. So in winter time that's really great. So if you live in any of the Nordic countries, say Canada, Scandinavia, it's good to know that heating this car is really great. So with that, I have touched upon all my talking points for this driving segment. Let's head over to the middle of nowhere where I'll give my final thoughts on the all-new Suzuki Swift. And we're back in the middle of nowhere. It's a bit cloudy and overcast, but we have an audience. Let's call them the Suzukaus. Anyway, my final thoughts on the new Suzuki Swift. Well, it's so nice to have a car that stays true of the original concept of 20 years ago. We've seen a lot of retro styled cars, but they've grown a lot. The worst example of that is the new Mini. But the Swift, yeah, always stayed true to its concept and also to its dimensions. It didn't grow much in length or in height or in width. And speaking of width, did you know that the Japanese version of the Swift is narrower, I believe 4 or 6 centimeters, than the worldwide versions are? And also it didn't grow much in weight. It's the most lightweight car in its class. From a rational point of view, the Swift always made a lot of sense. It's well engineered, it's reliable, it's affordable, it's easy to maintain and cheap to operate. And having a lightweight car in the Netherlands translates to lower road taxes, and so that's also a nice thing to have. As you may know, I only test drive Japanese and Korean cars. It started out as some kind of hobby, specializing in those markets. And yeah, that's what started my website, started my channel. So it also means that my frame of reference are Japanese and Korean cars. And in that frame of reference, I would call the Toyota Yaris, especially the hybrid, the benchmark in this class. As I mentioned, in the under the hood segment, this is a very basic hybrid system that you barely can call a hybrid. It's a mild hybrid. And I compared it to the Toyota Yaris hybrid, which is much more complex and with that much more expensive. But Suzuki shows that with simple technology you can yield great results. It relies mostly on the internal combustion engine with the assistance, a little bit of assistance of a starter generator. And still you have great driving characteristics. The engine is smooth, it's powerful enough. It's not the most powerful car in its class, but it does get great fuel economy. My average fuel consumption after a week of test driving the car is 24 kilometers per liter, where I got to 28 kilometers per liter with a Toyota Yaris. If I were to get a Yaris hybrid with the same equipment as in this car, for the price of that Yaris, which is almost 30,000 euros, I can buy this car. As tested, it is 25,345 euros, and for the money I save with that, I can drive this car for 60,000 kilometers, maintenance included. So yeah, that's food for thought. And especially when you look at it from a practical point of view, I mean, cars in this vehicle class are the most sold cars, the so-called B segment, over here in the Netherlands, because cars have gotten so expensive. Owning and buying a car is so expensive that people tend to downgrade to a smaller vehicle class. So this you could call a typical family car over here in the Netherlands. And also when you compare it to the Yaris, this has much more practical interior, especially the ingress and egress in the rear and seating comfort in the rear, and especially the space for adult passengers in the rear seat is much better when you compare it to the Yaris. Anyway, as you may have gathered, I really like this car. Makes a lot of sense, and it also is a lot of fun. And with that, I would like to end this real life car review. I do hope you liked following me along, and if you did, please let me know by subscribing to the channel, give me a like, and if you have any questions or constructive feedback, let me know down below in the comment section. Also, if you would like to help out the channel, you can do so by buying me a coffee. For that, I leave the link down below in the description box, and also I'll include a link to the fantastic first generation Suzuki Swift commercial from the mid-1980s. It's way over the top. There was a TV commercial, and I'll leave a link to the cinema commercial. It's a must watch. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Bye!